In today's tutorial, we're going to talk about motion warping. So motion warping is a plugin that comes shipped with Unreal. So you've already got it if you've got Unreal Engine 5. And here we can kind of see what's happening. So we need our player to touch a specific area. And when we kind of walk up to that area as the player, we don't know exactly where we need to stand to get the hand to hit that object. So we may stand over here. We might stand a little too far back. So what this does is it's going to kind of counter animate, move it closer to the object so that by the time the animation finishes or gets to where you want, it's going to touch the object. So here we can see that happening. So you see in the back example, the girl was already in the exact right place, but here she wasn't. She was kind of rotated a little to the side. And so they've done the motion warping, which is, you can see it's kind of adding a little bit of sliding in the feet. But it kind of ends up working, and we can do some things to improve that. So I'll show you how. So just to kind of drive this point home a little more and kind of explain how it works, I'm going to just show you an example here. So here we have a character who's needs to chop this object, right? But he's not in the right position. He's too close to the object, and so he goes past. And we don't want to make sure our player has to be in the exact spot because that would just be very difficult. So what we'll do is we'll just say on frame 1, let's do this, don't worry about Maya here. This is just to illustrate the points. But we're going to kind of add another layer on top. So on frame 1, we're going to stay where we were. And then when it gets to that chop frame, we're just going to say move the whole thing back. Then as it's playing, it's kind of counter animating. You can see his feet sort of slide backwards there. And then he ends up chopping where you want. So that's what motion warping does. And you get to control how long it takes him to slide and when it slides. So in this example, here he's sliding a lot while his feet aren't really moving. So let's start this movement a little bit later where he kind of pivots off that foot. And then we can sort of disguise it a little bit better. And you have a lot of control over how you do this. You can break it into several chunks so that it doesn't all happen at once. And that might help to hide what you're doing. So yeah, that's a look at motion warping. Okay, so the other thing that we need to understand in order to set up motion warping is the concept of root motion. So normally when you animate something like this, you're going to use the hips to drive the motion because that's how things really happen. Sometimes people call this the root bone, and this is a little confusing because really what root means is it means that it's the kind of bottom joint here, okay? So technically this is the root for this piece of geometry. But in Unreal, what we prefer to do is we use a root bone. So this is no different to any other bone. And, this is true for Blender or whatever, 3ds Max, whatever package you're using, this is still true. What I'll do is I'll parent that bone to that one. And now we have what's called a root bone, okay? So this is one step closer to what we want. So we could call this root. Okay, there you go. So you can see the root bone here. So with root motion, what we want is we want to take this motion here and we want to move it onto that root bone, because then what we can do is basically when you're controlling a character in Unreal, the main thing that you need to move around is this collision box, because this collision, or rather not a collision box, but a collision capsule, because this capsule is what is using gravity and physics, and it's stopping the character from falling through the ground. Everything else that's happening here, for the most part, is just a visual. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to get that horizontal movement off of this bone and onto the other one. So now we've converted that motion from animation that's on the hip to root motion. And now this is going to allow us to do the motion warping in Unreal. So this is an important step. You need to have an animation that has root motion. So now that we understand the fundamentals of motion warping and root motion, let's look at how we can start to create some really cool things with that.